Every haunted place has a story with a dark past. This is Ghost Encounters Podcast. Due to the graphic and violent things discussed on this episode, listener discretion is advised. Welcome back, all you spooky people, to the fourth episode of the second season of Ghost Encounters Podcast. I am paranormal investigator Justin Torok. Kayla and Jordan could not make it here today, but I do have a very, very special guest on this podcast episode. She is Hannah Wallner.
Woo! Hey, hello. So special.
Hannah and I went to East Stroudsburg University together. We also worked together, and she's actually been on investigations with me before, and you and I were on one this past weekend.
We were. It was a great time. The Perry Mansion. In New Hope.
That's right. We were in New Hope, Pennsylvania. We investigated the Perry Mansion. So a new episode of Ghost Encounters is coming out soon. It'll come out just in time for spooky season. I always remember the one investigation that you and I went on years ago. We were at the site of a Civil War prison in Elmira, New York. And how do you feel about ever going back to Elmira, New York?
It's a complicated feeling because the town itself is very bad. There was not, the most bumpin' thing going on up there was an Applebee's. And that was it. They had an Applebee's and a Wegmans, and everywhere else was just kind of sad and gray. But I have a friend who's from Elmira. Actually, she's from the town. And she's like, yeah, never go there. Don't go to Elmira. So...
But Elmira does have a site of a Civil War prison that housed, obviously, Confederate soldiers. And there's no structures or anything there, but the land is still there. And this place was absolutely awful back in its time. There was one small, I wouldn't even call it a river, what was it, like an extra large pond where this overcrowded prison, it was overcrowded by almost 10,000 people. And that's where they all bathed in and got their drinking water. There were so many disease outbreaks. It was awful. But some of the things I remember is that we got EVPs with Southern accents, which is really cool. We heard the sound of horse galloping, and obviously there's no horses around in Elmira, New York.
Just cars.
Yeah.
Cars passing through Elmira. But yeah, that was probably... I remember the one EVP that we got out there where I think it sounded like they were saying, hey, Yank.
Yeah, they said, hey, Yank.
And that was that was wild. It was just very topically appropriate, for the location. And it was, I don't think it was something that we ever, even could have, it wouldn't have occurred to us to create this on our own,
you
know?
Right. And just the EVPs that we got just clearly shows how the paranormal is real for all you disbelievers out there. What are the possibilities that at the site of a Civil War prison we get an EVP that says, hey, Yank, and various other EVPs with a Southern accent?
Yeah.
It's just a memory that I have with you that will always be in the back of my mind.
Yeah, it's...
And this past investigation was a lot of fun. New Hope was a really cool town, and I'm very excited for this episode of Ghost Encounters to come out, and I will let everyone know when it is released, and everyone should take a watch and follow on YouTube. It's going to be awesome.
I'm stoked. I'm stoked to see what we got.
Me too.
It was all... The atmosphere out there was great.
Yeah, and the story of the house is very interesting. Just a very wild house. And the stories of things that happened in there. The one room was used as a surgical room for the doctor taking care of soldiers in the Civil War, and obviously most of them didn't make it.
Yeah. And it's just about as close to really ancient history as you can get in the United States, you know?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, since I have you on, I always ask guests, what was your first ever ghost encounter?
Ooh, that's really hard, because I don't think that I have ever had a paranormal experience outside stuff that I have done with you.
Gotcha.
You know,
okay.
because we've been on investigations together, But, like, I don't know, the house I grew up in was built in, like, the 80s. My parents were the second people to own it. It wasn't really on the land of anything interesting.
Well, I always ask. You'd be surprised at how many people have had stories from childhood, from places they went to, the home they grew up in. But I always ask. But I am delighted to know that I was able to give you your first ever ghost encounter.
Yes. Yeah, you know, it was life-changing stuff right there, you know. You
Very
get
cool.
to kind of clip the other side.
Yeah. So outside of being a great photographer and videographer, there's something else that you do that I wanted to mention. And because it falls in with this podcast, at some point we are going to do an episode on cryptids.
Oh,
and
no!
You love cryptids.
I do.
But you also run Paint Squatch. Could you talk about Paint Squatch?
Okay. So I started doing Paint Squatch a little bit before, you know, COVID, where I was making, because I'm an artistic person. I like to draw. I like to paint. And so I decided I wanted to embark upon an art project.
Mm-hmm.
It's been kind of like a little dream to have maybe a gallery show at
Sure.
some point in my life. So I started doing these little tiny, like 3x3 canvases with cryptids on them.
What I love most is that the pictures on Instagram is always it's a Sasquatch. It's a Sasquatch glove that you're wearing, holding the cryptid art, and that's the picture, and it's so funny.
You're telling them how the sausage is made. You know, that's not me in the Sasquatch hands.
Oh,
That's
it's not you.
Sasquatch in the Sasquatch hands.
So it's actually Sasquatch.
It's totally 100%. Sasquatch paints them, not me.
Oh,
That's
very interesting.
yeah.
For those big hands, he's really got some fine detail.
It's impressive what you can do with those big
Where
hands.
can people follow Paint Squatch?
Currently it is just an Instagram account, so I am or the Sasquatch is at paint_squatch on Instagram.
Very cool. Go give Paint Squatch a follow. Check out some of the artwork and maybe purchase one for yourself.
Ta-da!
I know a little side project you don't really have an account for yet. You've been making Coraline dolls.
Yeah.
Oh my god, they look so realistic. You're making Coraline dolls of people you know, and it's really cool.
Yeah, I've been doing commissions based on, you know, photos that people send me of themselves, and I've done a couple that are like kind of, I don't want to call them horror merch, but they're characters from horror movies.
Yes.
I did.
You made Fluffy.
Yeah, I did. I did Fluffy from Creepshow.
Yeah.
It was Creepshow 2.
The detail you put in that was absolutely stunning. The fur on it and the shape of the mouth and the teeth, the blood, everything put together so well. If any of you are interested in a custom Coraline doll or horror piece, she is the person to go to. So reach out to Hannah if you want one of those. But while we were working the one day, you started talking about something called the Franklin Expedition.
Yes.
And you got so passionate when you started talking about this. And as you were telling me the story, I sat there and thought, how many expeditions have somewhat ended in tragedy and cannibalism? So this episode is called Expedition Cannibalism. In 1848, the Franklin Expedition's two ships, HMS Erebus and HMS Terror, disappeared with all their crew while searching for the Northwest Passage. All 129 men perished, and their fate is one of the enduring mysteries of the age of polar exploration. Numerous expeditions were sent out to find them, and strange clues led to theories being proposed to explain what happened. Dark rumors of cannibalism only made the mystery more compelling. However, the remains of what was left is what makes the story more terrifying. Can you tell us more about the Franklin Expedition?
Okay, yes. After some exhaustive Googling, see, the first thing I ever heard, the first time I ever heard about the Franklin Expedition was on the Ask a Mortician YouTube series.
Okay.
Caitlin Doty talked about it because getting a little bit ahead of myself, there were some bodies that were found
Right.
of members of the Franklin Expedition that were really, really well preserved.
Well, it was cold up there, so...
Cold, dry. You got a good recipe for some pretty killer natural mummies. But I have a pretty weird interest in mummies, kind of as a sort of physical object and or bridge between, you know, the living person who had, you know, a personality and thoughts and fears and desires, and the, you know, the once the soul has fled the body, you're left with this husk,
this casing, this vessel.
Yeah, it's the bits that people left behind, and they're kind of unstuck in time.
Right.
These like weird relics of humanity. And some of them resulted from the Franklin expedition, which the expedition took place, as already stated, 1848. The British Admiralty, which is basically the Navy, had there was a higher up in the British Navy, and he decided that because he was, you know, in his 80s at the time, and it was getting time for him to either retire or die.
I mean, back then, the age that you lived till wasn't very high, and this guy's already 80.
Yeah,
he's still going on
that's
one last.
old.
Was this his one last expedition?
Yeah, it wasn't his expedition. He was too old to start out on the expedition, but he was in charge, and he was in charge of selecting the ships, the captains of the ships.
So he didn't actually go on.
He did not go.
I was gonna say, because these expeditions were months long. Like,
oh my god, months,
he would have
years,
died halfway through.
Yeah, there are some. It was like normal to get out there and just die on the open water where people are not supposed to be.
No.
You're not supposed to be out on the ocean. But regardless, British Navy decided they were gonna mount this expedition to find the Northwest Passage. And what the Northwest Passage basically is a convenient sailing route from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean to facilitate easier trade with Asia.
Right.
So I guess, you know, the eternal British quest for those spices.
Right,
You know?
but this passage doesn't even exist.
Not as such. Like, there's no... there isn't like a big channel up there, you know. There's no like nice little fjord where you can just kind of scoot around the North Pole.
Right.
Like, you can go through a bunch of
icebergs and glaciers.
There's icebergs, there's bays, there's rivers. You kind of have to go through all these like landlocked waterways in Canada to try and get all the way through, and it's hardly worth it.
Right.
And
the risk of crashing is way more than just taking a longer route.
Yeah, and which is not to say that the typical routes were any easier. Part of the reason that they wanted to find the Northwest Passage to begin with is because sailing around the tip of South Africa was also very dangerous and took a long time. Or you could go the other way. I guess you could sail straight at North America and go down all the way around Cape Horn in Chile, and then you'd have to go back up, sail around the continent again, and eventually you would end up in Asia.
Right. And
by that time, it took a long time. You had to supply. You needed water, which is heavy and hard to transport.
Food, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. It's a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
So whichever way you want to swing it, it's a nightmare. So they were looking for an easier route to kind of, I don't know, take the edge off at least. But so it was a relatively common thing to search for. You know, there were a lot of expeditions mounted. Right. But it was
most of the world wasn't really explored at this time, and who knew what you're getting into?
Yeah. At this time, they had just about mapped the entirety of the world, like, lower than the Arctic Circle. Gotcha. Like, the Arctic was the only bit that they hadn't really explored yet. So it was really the white whale, you know, for an appropriate nautical metaphor. It was the white whale of, you know, at the time, of British colonial expeditions. So he was looking for this. He wanted the higher up in the Navy, whose name I didn't write down. I think it was Brown. He wanted to be the guy. He wanted to be the guy who sent the guys out, who found the Northwest Passage, honor and glory forever, till the end of time.
Right. For a man who didn't actually go on the expedition.
Yeah,
but
no skin in the game. Which, it's interesting that to have actually heard the reason for it now. I always kind of just assumed it was some rich guy who decided he wanted to do it. It was some rich guy who decided he wanted to do it.
Right, as it always comes down to. But he actually had a legitimate reason to want to find it.
Yeah, rather than, just for funsies. But anyway, the man selected to lead the expedition was Sir John Franklin. He was an officer in the British Navy, and he was actually 5th on the short list.
Oh.
For to be captain of the expedition, to be in charge.
Turn it down?
Yes, actually.
So would I.
I would too. I think, but the first choice, he decided that he didn't want to do any more Arctic expeditions. He was getting too old, and they were too dangerous.
Right.
The second choice, he decided he had just gotten married, and he promised his wife he wouldn't go on any more dangerous Arctic expeditions. So really, saved his life right there.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to stay home.
All these excuses, which are legitimate, and then we come down to the 5th person, and here he is.
Yeah, he decided he was gonna go for it, and he was not particularly young either. Sir John Franklin was at the time 59 years old.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, the captain's got to have someone with some experience. So
yeah,
never gonna be like a young guy. He's got to have experience.
Mm-hmm.
If this guy ever went to the Arctic before?
He had. He actually went to the Arctic. In addition to being a veteran of multiple wars, he fought in the French Revolution. He fought in the War of 1812 and the Napoleonic Wars. So he was experienced in battle, but he had also been on 2 other Arctic expeditions. The first one, I suppose, was not that noteworthy, but the second one was the Copper Mine expedition, where 20 of his men died due to starvation, mostly.
Well, yeah.
Which I guess, again, typical.
Yeah.
You're going to a place where human beings are not supposed to be.
Right. There's no chance of finding any kind of food anywhere. So
yeah,
you have what you bring.
Yeah, you got what you got, and you're probably gonna die. But the survivors of the Copper Mine expedition, they survived by eating whatever they could, which ended up finally being the leather that made up their boots.
Oh.
They ate their boot leather. So they one of the sources that I was reading in my research, they were like, oh yeah, John Franklin, he had this funny nickname, and it was they used to call him the man who ate his own boots. I'm like, I don't really think that that's a nickname. It's just accurate. Yeah. It's just a descriptor. Homie was eating shoe leather. The person who was serving under him, I guess as not necessarily co-captain, but I guess first mate, was a man called Francis Crozier, and he was actually also on the short list of people who could have captained the Franklin expedition. Okay. But the higher ups in the British Navy decided they did not want him to be captain because he was Irish, and they didn't want.
They didn't like the Irish that much.
Yep, they didn't want an Irish person to be
the legacy of
the Northwest Passage. They didn't want to give the Irish that one. So I'm like, oh, great, British. Awesome. But under the 2 of them, there were 129 other sailors who would be departing from Britain. The 2 ships that were chosen for this expedition were called the HMS Terror.
Perfect for the story. Perfect.
And the HMS Erebus, which the Terror, I mean, everybody knows what the Terror means. It's very appropriate. And I was thinking, like, why? Why would you do this? Why would you name this ship something so terrifying and then send it to the Arctic, where you're probably gonna die?
Well, I mean, it was probably used before.
It was.
So it was probably used in a battle or something, right?
It was a warship.
That makes sense.
Yep, it was a warship, and it was, I guess, It was a bomber. And it was actually previously used in the American Revolution and in the very battle during which Francis Scott Key composed the Star-Spangled Banner.
Wow, did not know that.
She was there.
This
Terror
ship has seen some days.
Truly.
Wow.
So she was already an old ship. She'd seen battle. She'd been repaired, I would imagine.
Oh, right.
But she was also retrofitted to be an Arctic explorer ship.
Cool.
In addition to having the hull reinforced so as not to be completely bashed to splinters by icebergs and rocks and whatever you encounter out there. It also had the boiler from a steam locomotive. It had a steam engine inside it, so it wasn't just sail powered.
Right.
So you wouldn't, I guess, get stuck.
I'm assuming the boiler let off heat to help.
Mm-hmm. It essentially had central heating.
That's cool.
Which obviously would keep the crew more comfortable, but also was helpful to keep the ship from freezing.
Right.
On the outside. And also, I wrote something down interesting here, and I think I got ahead of it. But it had a library. The ships had libraries.
Really?
Yeah.
Damn.
I'm like, that's kind of sweet.
Gives everyone something to do on this long journey.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with that said, what does Erebus mean then?
See, the Erebus was named... Also, again, if you're thinking of this as a warship, it makes more sense. Okay. But the Erebus is named after the Greek god of primordial darkness and chaos.
For an expedition like this, we have two very aptly named ships.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
You look at that and you already know shit's going to go down. It's going to go down and it's going to be bad.
Yeah.
Hindsight is 20/20. We all know about this. Another of the interesting features of the Terror and the Erebus was that they had pipes for a desalination system, so that you wouldn't necessarily have to carry as much fresh water with you.
They had that back then?
Yeah, they had desalination systems.
Wow.
Don't ask me how it worked.
I had no idea they had that back then. You just blew my mind.
Thank you, human ingenuity. But they were supplied for 3 years. They had enough canned food to last them for 3 years.
That's a lot, actually.
Yeah.
For that amount of men. Yeah, that's...
Yeah, 129 guys.
That's a good supply.
Well, if they rationed it very carefully, they could make it last 5 years, allegedly.
Holy crap. That's...
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a lot. It's a lot of food, a lot of packing.
Very surprised.
Truly. But the food that they had canned for the expedition, they had this all prepped and ready to go.
Right, I'm sure.
Before taking off. However, the company that they hired to produce and can their food was kind of under the gun. They were rushing. So it turns out that in addition to some other problems, some of the food was not properly cooked before it was canned. Oh. So it contained botulism, which is that's the kind of food poisoning that kills you, basically. And in addition to the botulism, the soldering on the cans was not done correctly.
So it wasn't really sealed properly.
So it wasn't. It was already going to make you sick. It was already not sealed correctly, but the soldering contained lead, a lot of lead.
And lead does not mix with food.
No, no, it does not.
So they're getting potential food poisoning of spoiled food and lead poisoning.
Yes.
Jeez.
So we're already maybe not starting out on the best foot.
I mean, they don't know this, but they're gonna find out.
Yeah. Other than that, though, when it came time to launch the ship in May of 1845, the launch was uneventful. Everybody got on the ship, they packed their things on the ship.
And they just left?
And they left.
No waving goodbye and horn.
I suppose they did, you know. It was everybody said goodbye to their partners and just sailed off into the sunset for parts unknown. After that, the last time they were seen by other European people was at Baffin Bay. They were seen by a few fishermen. Okay. And this is that kind of story. For 170 years, nobody saw them again.
Wow.
No European person at any rate, because literally everyone died. So, the first winter they were out to sea, they had managed to cross the Atlantic. Everything was going okay until they became iced in at a place called Beachy Island. And it's not spelled beachy, B-E-A-C-H, it's beachy with 2 E's.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So it's a cold place.
Yeah.
We're not talking some kind of tropical island there. And they packed the ship in snow, and they were just waiting out the winter. And they hunted, they fished, they rationed their food.
Wow.
And 130 dudes just hung out in the Arctic.
Jeez.
Just doing... At least they had the library.
I mean, yeah, they had that, but that's a long time to just kind of...
It is. They were...
be stuck there.
Yeah. But they did escape from Beachy Island.
Okay.
At least most of the men did. Unfortunately, there were 3 casualties on Beachy Island. They were John Torrington, William Brain, and John Hartnell. And near as anybody can tell, because their bodies were discovered, they are the 3 well-known Franklin expedition mummies.
Oh, cool.
So their bodies were exhumed and found to have been mummified. They were found on Beachy Island, and
was there like a grave site or something?
Yeah, there were 3 headstones, 3 grave sites, and a cairn built on Beachy Island.
Oh, wow.
Where they had left notes basically saying,
Gotcha.
the Terror and the Erebus were here,
Right.
All is well, except for, these poor souls, who, near as anybody can tell, they didn't say in the note what these men had died of, but later research determined that they had died of tuberculosis and or pneumonia.
Oh, wow.
So,
makes sense.
Yeah, probably not a great death.
Anything special about the way they looked, mummified wise?
They look like a nightmare. Yes,
How's the best way you can describe what they look like for everyone listening?
Oh God!
I'll tell everyone to go look up some pictures.
Google it. You got to Google it, or don't. If you're, if that's gonna make you upset, don't Google it. If it's gonna make you upset, obviously. But if you want to think about just eyes open, teeth bared, just leathery looking blue and yellow dead guys.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, they're all kind of their clothes are very well preserved, and you can still see the colors that they wore. This one guy, I believe it was John Torrington. I don't know if this is his real hair or not that you see in the photo, but he's got this beautiful head of long blonde curly hair.
Oh.
And I'm like, is this a wig? Is this his hair? What are you? You have no right to have this beautiful beautiful hair
Right.
after 170 years in the ground. But what are you?
So basically, the clothes are well preserved, the hair is somewhat well preserved, but their skin is purpley blue, leathery, probably shrunken.
Yeah,
eyes wide
real,
open.
Mm-hmm.
Did their gums and lips recede or anything?
I suppose their gums did recede. They're pretty dried out.
Yeah.
At this point, but they really look like they could blink.
Ooh.
They look like they could blink at you, and they're really wild looking. They're wild looking mummies.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. A little bit of a nightmare, but they're very cool to look at. Just historically, wow. You got to think prior to death, these things were people.
Right.
So
what happened after they left Beachy Island?
Beachy Island. They continued to sail. At one point, they came to a fork in the road. I believe they chose to... they could have gone, I guess, either further north or a little further south between 2 dividing waterways. And they chose to go down the Victoria Strait.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that was the north or the south one, but that's what they picked. And eventually, they reached King William Island, in what is today known as Nunavut in Canada.
None. Okay, it's spelled. How is it spelled?
Nunavut.
All these words that sound like something, but they're not the thing you're thinking of.
But there's actually funny story. My boyfriend, his family is from Newfoundland in Canada, and we actually met a guy who was a friend of his family who teaches in Nunavut. He teaches,
cool.
he teaches at like, a school where there are a lot of kids from indigenous communities.
Wow.
But apparently food prices up there are insane.
Oh, I can imagine. It's probably hard to get stuff up there.
Yeah, but also, like, come on, guys. It's like $30 for a little punnet of strawberries. It's ridiculous.
Oh, jeez.
But how you supposed to get your vitamin C, man? People are going to get scurvy, and it's 2022. None of it. Yes, that's where we're at. We are on King William Island, and that is where everything started to get real bad.
Gotcha.
We are now in our second winter. It is, I guess, our third winter, maybe. Either way, it is September 12th, 1848, and the ships become icebound.
Right, because as we know, up there, this doesn't melt.
Yeah.
Just all ice all the time.
And I guess theoretically it would have melted in spring, but the 2 winters that we're aware of with the Franklin expedition, where they were like iced in, were 2 of the worst winters that the Arctic has ever seen. That's always how these
stories go. It's always, this weird storm or the worst winter. It's always how these stories go.
Some kind of freak thing happens and everybody dies. But they got snowed in. And just like before, they were like, okay, we'll hunt, we'll fish, we'll wait this out.
They went through this once already. They thought they could probably wait it out and get through it again.
Mm-hmm. But turns out they could not. The ice did not melt in the spring. They were stuck in the ice on King William Island for 18 months.
Wow.
It's just an unimaginable length of time.
Yeah.
Really. To be stuck in one place.
Yeah. I mean, we all went through COVID and we were locked down for just a few months, but imagine being locked in an icebound ship for over a year.
With like 130 other guys. You haven't seen anybody else. You can't write home. Like, nobody knows where you are.
There had to be a couple of weird sexual things going on.
Always. It's, sometimes you get bored. You get bored, it's real cold, somebody starts spooning.
My mind's telling me no, but my body's telling me yeah.
But, regardless, they had also started to run out of food.
Well, of course.
I guess we are now entering the 3rd year.
I'm assuming the boiler's not running.
I don't know about that. Did the boiler break down?
I don't know. I mean, what ran the boiler?
Coal? Yeah, probably.
They said steam engine.
Yeah, so I guess you would have to have coal.
But you're going to run out of it eventually.
Yeah. And it's not like there's trees up there.
No, it's just...
Eventually you're going to be breaking down, like, I don't know, chairs and clocks and stuff.
Probably, whatever you can
Cannibalizing
find.
The ship and throwing it into the boiler.
The ship itself. Yeah, the ship itself.
I don't know. Or maybe it was just too much for, steam power and or wind power to handle.
Yeah.
The ice gets real thick. It's maybe a little bit rocky out there. You don't know what you're doing. Around this point in time, John Franklin dies.
Oh, okay.
The captain dies.
Jeez.
Captain Franklin of the Franklin expedition is
now
dead.
The men are running without a captain.
Yep. Well,
I mean, someone else's point in charge.
Yes.
And is it going to be the dude that they didn't want?
Yeah, it was the Irish guy. It was Francis Crozier was now the acting captain of the Terror and the Erebus. There was another man under him, but I didn't write down his name. But Crozier was the person who eventually made the decision to leave the ship. The ill-fated decision to leave the ship. And
How do they know which way to go?
I suppose they had a compass.
But still, like...
Yeah, It was not a good life choice. It was not... I don't know what better choice they necessarily would have had. But they decided it was time to put all of their things onto sledges, like big sleds, and trek out into the wilderness of snowy winter King William Island. Why would they make this decision? Oh, they were right. They were aiming for a Canadian trading post where they thought they could find help from other white people. They thought they were going to make it to this trading post, which was 800 miles away.
Wow, that's a long distance.
Yeah.
What did they bring in these sleds?
Well, they brought a grandfather clock.
Of all things.
They brought
books.
That's
a necessity. On a sled to truck 800 miles in the Arctic. You bring books and a grandfather clock. And
granted, they did bring their food, but at this point, and I'm sure they weren't aware of it, but at this point, the remainder of their food was spoiled due to the improper canning. It was full of lead, and it was probably only making things worse.
Right, because as we know, lead poisoning will make you go crazy.
Yeah, it basically causes full-blown psychosis if you have enough lead in your system.
So throwing a grandfather clock in the sled to bring it somewhere probably didn't seem like a bad idea.
Yeah, it kind of starts if you have a complete break with reality, it kind of starts to make sense.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is a thing that's valuable, it's worth money. We got to take this with us, you know? Especially if they're already far gone enough that they think that they can make it 800 miles to a trading post. But health has started to rapidly deteriorate.
Yeah.
Everybody's kind of not doing great in the head. The lemon juice that they had canned and also full of lead and probably botulism was no longer as potent in the vitamin C department as it was when it was canned.
Right.
So people are losing teeth, they're getting scurvy. That I think can also have like neurological side effects, the scurvy. Not to mention like probably got some PTSD going on.
Oh, I'm sure.
You've been stranded with
everything that keeps happening and just making it worse and worse and worse.
Not to mention, each one of these sledges weighed around 8,000 pounds.
Oh.
And they're dragging them through the wastes in the Arctic.
They could have gotten so much further if they didn't have it.
It wasn't a good call. But nonetheless, they venture forth with their very heavy sledges into the killing Arctic cold, and as men would die, where they stood, I guess in the traces of these sledges, they would drop to the ground and be picked up and thrown onto the sledges, which
adding more weight to less men.
Yes. So life choices are made, and everybody is so delirious that they have basically had complete breaks with reality.
Yeah.
Up until this point, there have been other expeditions sent out to try and find these guys.
Because it's been so long.
Yeah, it's been several years. Nobody's seen them. Nobody's heard from them. They've obviously not reached their destination. They've not found the Northwest Passage. They've definitely not found that Canadian trading post.
Yep.
So John Franklin's wife, her name is Jane Griffin, she gets on the case of the British Navy and says, hey, we need to start looking for these guys. We need some more expeditions to go and find my husband and all these other 130 guys that y'all sent out into the wilderness for capital gain. Usually I don't go in for stuff from psychics, right?
Right.
But I thought this was kind of a really wild story. When when I guess news started disseminating that Jane, the wife of Sir John Franklin, was looking to mount this expedition to go and find him. There was another shipbuilder who was not necessarily connected to the Terror in the Erebus, but like tangentially aware of them, and that the expedition never came back. He actually contacted her and said, look, I have kind of this weird situation. Turns out this man, whose name was William Coppin, he had in 1849 his 3-year-old daughter Louisa, who they called Wheezy for short.
Wheezy?
When you're a little kid, that's weird. If you're like an adult and somebody's calling you Wheezy, you gotta make people stop. But, you know, if you're a little kid, it's like, oh, that's cute. Let's call her Wheezy. But anyway, so his daughter Louisa passed away at the age of 3, which is very sad.
Yep.
After her death, the family started to notice weird things happening in the house. Like they would see balls of light and they would hear knocking. And they all decided that this was Wheezy.
Okay.
This is the spirit of Wheezy. She came back. She's still with us. And they started setting a place for her at meals.
Oh.
And as it turned out, she also could kind of like conduct a little seance and pass along information. And people, like some of her siblings, would hear her, like with their ears, even though not everybody in the house could or would.
Right.
So who knows if the kids are just like making it up, or if you know, maybe there's actually something verifiable going on there.
Right.
But Wheezy relayed information through her sister Anne that she knew what happened to the Franklin expedition. Wheezy the ghost.
For little kid, and for little kids to say this, like that's
wild.
Yeah.
Like for a little kid to be like, oh yeah, my dead sister knows about this.
Yeah.
Or for like a dead 3-year-old.
It's not like her dad built a ship and is talking about it every day.
Yeah.
That's
I don't know how much information was just available to the general public, but like to little kids.
Well, knowing the British, they probably would have. I mean, like you said, they probably kept that under wraps a bit.
Yeah, you know, if like, oh, the expedition didn't go so well, and these dudes are probably dead out there. Like, but anyway, channeled by her sister Anne, Wheezy describes this scene where she can see the Arctic like laid out in front of her with 2 ships and snowy mountains and like narrow channels and bays. And when she was pressed further about information on specifically John Franklin, she said that she could see a round-faced man climbing the mast and waving his hat. And this was in 1849 when he was still alive.
Right.
So he was alive, regardless of whether or not he was able to climb the mast. I don't know. But some of the other bizarrely specific information that she provided were the names of the ships. She told them that they were called the Terror and the Erebus. And she also gave them Prince Regent Inlet and the Victoria Channel. Which, you know, as I brought up earlier,
it wasn't called that.
Yeah, they were at the Victoria Strait, which it wasn't necessarily called the same thing, but it's you know, it's pretty close. Yeah. And also, it wasn't called that on any map at the time. It was just something that they had been calling it as they were, you know, living there in their ship. Yeah, and when some of the other expeditions that were mounted. Jane took this all very seriously because, you know, I'm assuming she wanted her husband to not die. So one of the expeditions that she sent out to find them actually tried to get into the Victoria Strait, but at the time it was iced in and they couldn't. So they
didn't get to it.
Yeah,
they would have found it though.
Oh yeah, because
it
was in there.
Holy crap.
It was iced in there.
Who knew this clairvoyant little girl talking to her dead sister is giving information about where to find them. That's crazy.
Startlingly accurate.
If it wasn't frozen over, they would have found them.
Yeah. I mean, they might have already left the ships by then. I don't know, but
who knows? But they at least would have known what had happened more.
Yeah.
By getting there a lot sooner.
So expeditions go forth, and they trace the route. They're going through all the various little inlets and bays and looking for the Terror and the Erebus. They find notes that were left behind. They find the graves on Beachy Island.
Okay.
And they also finally start talking to the indigenous people, who I believe are the Inuit. And they, because they live out there.
Yeah.
They know how to survive in the Arctic. They know how to do it. They've been living there for several thousand years, and they've got that on lock. And it turns out that they did know. They did know what happened to the Franklin expedition. All you had to do was ask, guys.
You only want to ask the white man. Well, the other people know what's going on.
Yeah. And they actually had some pretty awful stories to share.
I'm sure.
It's because if you thought it was bad with scurvy and botulism and lead poisoning and psychosis and everybody dying, it gets worse, you guys. One of the sources that I found was a really, really good blog. It was the Herodotus History blog, and I hope nobody gets mad that I brought that up. But they describe this camp of Inuit people who are waiting. It was basically elderly people and women and kids. Just they were sitting in their, I guess in their lodge. And they saw these 8 or 9 figures shambling out of the snowy wastes, and they had their teeth bared, and they were blue, and they were shrunken, and they tried to speak to them, but these figures were incapable of human speech. And when touched, their skin was cold to the touch. They were basically, they were zombies at this point. They were very nearly human beings. But nonetheless, the Inuit people invite them into the lodge, and, they're trying to comfort them, they're trying to warm them up. But these guys, they're not really responding. They can't speak. They seem kind of terrified.
Yeah.
When, there was a hunting party sent out. When the hunting party returns, they build a lodge for these men, doing the decent thing. And they even gave them a couple of seals so that they could eat them and, regain strength and maybe start to, warm up, communicate, get their shit back together. But when they returned to check on them in the lodge, they had gone and the seals were untouched. However, they did find some bones, human bones, of, previous members of this party. And it appeared that the bones had been stripped, and they
have been eating.
They had been eating each other.
Yeah. I know from watching a documentary about cannibalism, and that there are some parts in various other countries where these third world tribes do cannibalize, and it pretty much makes your mind go crazy, almost like mad cow disease.
Yeah. In developing countries, there are certain cultures that practice ritual cannibalism, and sometimes it's to honor ancestors. They'll eat, the body of their ancestor after that ancestor has died, and you can. I think in certain cultures they call the disease kuru.
Okay.
Which is a prion disease similar to mad cow disease.
Yeah.
And I think it's, I think a prion is a rogue protein that it's not alive, so you can't kill it like you could a virus or bacteria, and it just gets into your brain and it eats holes in your brain.
That's where this whole zombie half living, half dead thing comes about, because that's what they end up being like.
Yeah.
I've seen videos of people who have this weird disease because they ate human flesh for so long, and they literally seem half dead, half alive. It's so weird. Their body is just kind of like on autopilot.
Yeah.
And they can't. They're just almost nothing.
You eventually start to lose parts of your brain that make you.
Yeah.
And I guess it reserves all your like your automatic functions, like you can still breathe and blink and digest, but like you're gone.
Yep.
And I think that's Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. I think that's what they call it, but like don't quote me on it. I don't know. I know it's either Creutzfeldt-Jakob or Kuru or mad cow. There's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And there are actually certain tribal cultures that have developed like a genetic resistance to prion diseases because they practice ritual cannibalism.
Wow.
So it's not unheard of.
Right. Basically, with everything that's happened to these men, no wonder they're just pretty much nothing at this point.
Yeah, if they're eating each other, they're not doing good. They have the lead poisoning, which can cause some neurological side effects.
They got vitamin deficiencies, everything.
They've been out in the cold. They're just damaged beyond basically all repair.
Yeah.
They're walking dead men at this point. So probably despite any help that they could have received from the Inuit, they were not going to make it.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is when, Inuit people are telling these stories when they are interviewed.
Yeah.
And they, when British sailors on further expeditions bring this news back to the British Navy, like, it's immediately denied.
Of course.
Immediately. Like, no British person would ever be so uncivilized as to eat, another British person.
Yeah.
Like, the indigenous people must be lying, So, of course, they were not believed. It was swept under the rug, which kind of led it all to be swept under the rug.
Right.
And that was really the last that anybody heard from or about the Franklin expedition.
Wow.
Until the 1980s.
Oh.
When there were bodies discovered.
Oh.
Yeah, they found actual bodies of the members of the Franklin expedition. And these were not mummified. These were not like, human burials treated with reverence. It was basically just a mass grave. If a grave at all. It could have just been like a pile of bones.
Yeah.
And these bones were covered in tool marks.
Oh, which means someone was cutting flesh away from the bone.
Yep, the bones had been scraped of their flesh, probably to eat.
Yeah, well, sure.
And some of the long bones, like from arms and legs, were cracked to try and get at the marrow, which, like, if an animal's not going to saw through a bone with a knife and crack it, that was people. They're eating each other. At this point, It's confirmed. Cannibalism confirmed.
So, did they ever find the ships?
They did. With more help from the local Inuit tribes people, who had actually seen the ships and known of the ships for quite some time, even having been on board one of the ships and discovering several crew members dead with a fire still lit. They basically said, if you go out, they basically said, like, oh yeah, if you go out into these bays, you'll find the ships there. That's where we last saw them.
Wow.
But there was really nothing done about this in true British fashion.
Right.
They really weren't believed. Nobody really took it seriously until 2014. This is relatively recently.
Yeah, that is relatively recent.
Like, I remember when this happened. I remember hearing about it and being like, why would they call these ships the Terror and the Erebus? But there was an expedition mounted by the Canadian Parks. It was led by Parks Canada. Okay. There was an expedition led by Parks Canada, and it found the Erebus in 136 feet of water.
Oh.
In Wilmot and Crampton Bay. And this ship, the Erebus, was not in good shape.
can
It was very
imagine.
rusted.
It's how many hundreds of years old at this point?
It was basically falling apart. However, 2 years later, in 2016, they found the Terror in... Oh, they found it in Terror Bay.
Of
they
course,
found
the Terror was in Terror Bay. Lovely.
Which it's probably named after the ship. But that's where it was. They found the ship. That was in 80 feet of water and probably pretty visible.
Yeah.
And they mounted some dives. Some people went down there, and everything was really pristine.
Really?
It's very, very well preserved down
Wow.
there. They brought a couple of artifacts back. They're in great shape. Everybody was really excited.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because everybody wants to know, like, when
What?
did this really start to go south? What
Yeah.
happened? Did the members of the expedition, did they feel themselves deteriorating mentally? So the Parks Canada was looking to mount another expedition, and that expedition was slated for March 2020.
Oh, COVID. So that was
Yep.
put to a screeching halt.
Because of COVID. So that didn't happen, but the ships are still down there, and I am sure that something's going to happen. Probably, later rather than sooner.
Right.
Because I think everybody's still kind of getting back on their feet after COVID.
Right. Right. To actually either bring the ships out or salvage what they could. And
Yeah.
That'd be pretty cool. Wow.
Yeah. So something in the future. We may not have any concrete answers right now, but yeah, in our lifetimes we may learn the secrets of the Terror in the Erebus.
Well, that is enormously terrifying. And I'm gonna go put a jacket on, put the heat on. We're gonna take a break, and we'll be right back. This episode is brought to you by The Colony Meadery. If you haven't tried mead yet, it's alcohol made from honey, and it's the fastest growing alcoholic beverage in the United States. It's all natural, totally gluten-free, and delicious. And one of the best meaderies in the world is right here in the Lehigh Valley. Heading into their 10th year this fall, the Colony Meadery has 2 locations, 905 Harrison Street in Allentown and 211 East 3rd Street in the heart of Bethlehem Southside. Stop in and try a flight of meads, grab some bottles or cans to go, and experience some of the best booze in the world. They've got flavors ranging from tart and quaffable lemon laws and Wu-Tang Cran to cinnamon vanilla series of tubes and even the sweet heat of their mango habanero. Learn more at either location or at colonymeadery.com. Ghost Encounters podcast and show is sponsored by Phoenix Fire Media. Bring the heat to your online presence with their expert social media marketing, photography, and video productions. Visit phoenixfiremedia.com. If all you spooky people are enjoying the Ghost Encounters podcast, hit subscribe and give us 5 stars. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Ghost Encounters PA. To watch full episodes of the Ghost Encounters show, visit ghost-encounters.com. The Spooky Shop is now open for Ghost Encounters merch. Visit ghost-encounters.com and click on Spooky Shop. And we are back. So that was a fascinating and wild story.
A little bit of a deep dive.
Yeah.
A little bit.
No pun intended.
That doesn't come until after 2022. Back underwater.
But I looked up 2 other stories that had to do with expeditions and cannibalism. I'm going to start with the Jamestown colony. The harsh winter of 1609 in Virginia's Jamestown colony forced residents to do the unthinkable. A recent excavation at the historic site discovered the carcasses of dogs, cats, horses, and it's known that they were actually being consumed during a horrible time called the Starving Time.
Oh, jeez.
But a few other newly discovered bones, particularly though, tell a far more gruesome story: the dismemberment and cannibalism of a 14-year-old English girl. And this was actually somewhat recent as well. It was like 2012, 2013, where they discovered these girls' bones and discovered that she was cannibalized.
Oh, wow.
Because again, it had tool marks on the bones, and certain things were cracked and cut in certain ways, and that's what they know that what happened to this girl, Who knows how many other people were cannibalized, but they have the proof of this one incident, at least.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to cannibalism, I think one incident is enough.
Yeah. Much is still unknown about the circumstances of this grisly meal. The researchers who found her actually call her Jane. They're not sure whether she was murdered or died of natural causes, or whether it was one person or multiple people that decided to butcher her. But alas, they discovered this is what happens. Historians have always gone back and forth with Jamestown whether or not cannibalism actually happened. But given that her bones were found in a trash pit, cut, chopped, had tool marks, it was clear that her body was dismembered for consumption.
That's rough. That's a rough life.
Very rough.
You're 14.
And people are unsure of how horrible the harsh conditions were for the colonists of Jamestown. But they know that the conditions were harsh enough that it definitely would make them desperate enough to eat other humans and perhaps even commit murder to do so. The colony was founded in 1607 by 104 settlers aboard 3 ships, the Susan Constant, the Discovery, and the Godspeed. But only 38 survived the first 9 months of life in Jamestown, with most succumbing to starvation and disease. Some researchers speculate that the drinking water poisoned by arsenic and human waste also played a role. Because of the difficulties in growing crops, they arrived in the midst of one of the worst regional droughts in centuries, and many settlers were unused to the harsh agricultural labor. So again, here you had the worst winter ever recorded, and now we have one of the worst droughts ever recorded.
And were the settlers like, were they just like regular people, or were they?
They were just regular people.
Oh man.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure I don't of the survivors. I mean, I know there were sailors on the ships because there had to be. Mm-hmm. How many though? I don't know, because like I said, only 38 survived. They were really dependent on supplies that were brought by subsequent missions, as well as trade with Native Americans. But how much trade can you do when you don't speak each other's languages?
Yeah.
You know?
And I guess when you think that, the other party is lesser than you.
And it's winter. The Native Americans are probably, doing what they need to do to survive and not worrying about the white men that are over here. But by the winter of 1609, extreme doubt, hostile relations with members of the local Powhatan Confederacy, and the fact that a supply ship was lost at sea put the colonists in a truly desperate position. George Percy, who had been president of Jamestown during the starving time, wrote a letter describing the colonists' diet during that terrible winter. Here it is. Having fed upon our horses and other beasts as long as they lasted, we were glad to make shift with vermin as dogs, cats, rats, and mice, as to eat boots, shoes, or any other leather. And now famine beginning to look ghastly and pale in every face, that nothing was spared to maintain life, and to do those things which seem incredible, as to dig up dead corpses out of graves and to eat them. And some have licked up the blood which hath fallen from their weakened fellows.
Wow. So he kind of cops to it without copping to it.
Yeah.
It's like we definitely ate other people.
Yeah.
But like,
and it was very difficult to read that because it was written in Old English, and the words are written very, very strangely.
Yeah, the spelling. The spelling is not.
Yeah, but he pretty much admitted that they started eating dogs, cats, rodents. They ate their horses, and it just got so bad that they had to dig up graves and eat the corpses.
I think I could probably dig up a corpse and eat a corpse before I killed a dog.
Honestly, same.
I love my dog. I really love my dog.
Too. Like, honestly, same.
Yeah. We talked about it during COVID. I'm like, look, man. Look, if we die in here of COVID, the dog can eat me. It's okay. You guys can eat me to survive. The dog can have some. It's fine. Don't eat my dog. Oh, man.
When the archaeologists were studying Jane, as they call her, it appeared that her brain, tongue, cheeks, and leg muscles were eaten, with most likely the brain eaten first because it decomposes so quickly after death. There wasn't really evidence of murder. They suspect that this was a case of hungry colonists simply ate what remaining food was available to them, which unfortunately was dead bodies.
Mm-hmm. Well, I suppose at least they didn't kill her, you know?
Right.
Not
There's
like
no...
her.
I'm sure it happened in some cases, but in Jane's case, it didn't look like there was foul play.
For her sake, you know. I think I saw that they did a facial reconstruction of her.
What was left because her skull was kind of bashed in crudely.
Yeah, to get brain.
The other thing that they noted was, yes, there were tool marks on the bones, but they weren't done in a butchering fashion. So most people knew how to clear the flesh off of certain animal bones.
Just back in the day.
But
like
you wouldn't know how to do that to a person.
Mm-hmm.
So it just made more evidence that it was just
people. It was survival.
It was survival, yeah, cannibalism. With all that being said, I mean, these people went through awful conditions. Awful things happened. They did awful things to each other. So now this area of Jamestown is pretty haunted.
Cool.
Jamestown has long been shadowed in tales of the supernatural. Those brave enough to visit the island at night have heard disembodied voices, screaming, and crying. Many orbs can be seen with the naked eye, and shadowy figures stalk the living.
Wow.
Also reported across Jamestown are objects moving on their own, archaeological tools found scattered, and reports at dig sites of artifacts uncovering themselves as if wanting to be found.
Oh, that's neat.
I don't know how much I believe in that one, but that's pretty cool.
Yeah. When I was a kid, my dad's kind of like a history buff. My dad's a bit of a colonial history buff. And hi, Dad. Shout out to my dad. But we went to Jamestown when I was a little kid. We did the colonial Williamsburg, and it's wild out there because they have like people in costume, and they have like some reconstructed little log homes and like a little log church, and it's wild to think about the stuff that actually went down there instead of the cute little grandma in a mob cap like pounding corn. They ate a kid.
This place was kind of tragic. But with what you just described, what I have found as a paranormal investigator is that when you preserve history in a place like that, you preserve landmarks or buildings, and you have artifacts, and you have people walking around in those clothes, it kind of enhances the supernatural, right? Versus whether you just demolish everything and build new cities on top of it, it kind of goes away. But trapping that history kind of then traps those souls as well.
Do you think that points to like an intelligent kind of spirit energy?
I would have to be there to find out. A lot of historic hauntings are said to be more residual, kind of like a broken record of the past. People see the same thing all the time. For example, you're not going to know this until you watch the episode of Ghost Encounters from the Perry Mansion, but people have seen this same dude, Oliver, pacing back and forth between the two windows with a candlestick, and that's residual.
Like if
they don't know you're there, they don't respond to you, but typically in tragic situations, it tends to be more of an intelligent haunting. They know they're trapped. They're stuck in tragedy, Some places you have both. So I'm sure both kind of happen here in Jamestown.
Fair enough.
There is one story I'd like to share about Jamestown. In August 1776, so we're jumping forward a little bit, Lydia Ambler married a dashing young soldier named Alexander Maupin. Shortly after their wedding, Alexander was sent off to fight in the American Revolution. According to legend, poor Lydia was always on the lookout for his return. She would sometimes trek the shores of the James River in hopes of seeing him come home. Otherwise, she would keep an eye out for her beloved Alexander from one of the Ambler mansion windows. During one of her hours of vigilance, Benedict Arnold set the house on fire.
Holy shit.
Benedict Arnold's first fought on American side during the Revolutionary War, but then became a British Army general. In Alexander's absence, Colonel John Ambler, one of Edward's sons, handled restorations of the house. Lydia then resumed to her post, just waiting for Alexander to return. However, the young woman grew suspicious. She had not received any news or letters from her husband. She couldn't seem to shake the feeling that Alexander had married her for her money and had simply abandoned her. So, I mean, this tends to happen when people are waiting for their long love in war. Like, you have that hope of seeing them again, and then all that worry and fear comes in your mind. So she was not well. And people say that she was so angry that she committed suicide by drowning herself in the James River.
Wow.
After Lady Ambler's death, David Bullock purchased the estate. The house burned again during the Civil War, but was again promptly rebuilt. However, after the third blaze, which happened in 1895, it was permanently abandoned. They just said, all right, we're not, no more. This house is not supposed to be here.
Yep.
Who knows? Maybe the anger, the fiery anger that was in Lydia is what keeps causing this house to burn down.
Never again. Never again. Yeah, I can see that. You know, if you're so angry in your life that you're willing to destroy yourself, then everybody else can.
Yeah,
you know,
but
suck
3
that
times this house set ablaze. Today, the estate's remains are overseen by the National Park Service and are open to visitors. Archaeological digs have uncovered a mass grave beneath the house, and researchers believe that it's the skeletons belonging to the settlers who died in the starving times. So this house was built on top of a mass grave from the worst time in Jamestown.
Wow.
This house was doomed from the start.
Yeah, like
You
before
don't
even
build
put that
houses
sucker
on
up.
top of graves.
Well, I mean, I guess you could, but you got to move the bodies. Poltergeist.
Right. You can't just move the headstones.
Yep, you got to move.
But I don't think there even were headstones.
No, it was a burial pit. They didn't have time.
Yeah.
You know.
But these colonists are said to haunt these grounds. Also, Lady Ambler's ghost is one that's reported to be seen. She usually emerges from the back of the mansion and then heads towards the James River. She's kind of just taking the same route she always would to find Alexander. So this seems more like a residual haunting. She's described as an angry woman wearing a gown of the Revolutionary period. Swirls of unexplainable mist, as well as odd flickering lights, have also been around the Ambler mansion. Perhaps these are physical manifestations of Lady Ambler's grief, fury, and pain. It's just crazy how that house was doomed from the start.
Yeah.
You know? Like, no wonder it set ablaze 3 freaking times, and it's just awful.
Yeah, it wants to be left alone.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I'm pretty sure those grounds where all this happened should just be left alone.
Yeah, plant some trees, call it a loss.
Yeah.
It's fine. Just let nature have it.
Another expedition cannibalism that you probably have read about in school called the Donner Party.
My favorite.
Your favorite?
Okay.
Excellent.
I love historical cannibalism stories.
You really do.
I do. I love mummies and cannibalism. I'm not messed up, I promise.
I love all things dark and twisted, so believe me, and I'm sure most of our listeners do too, so you're not alone. We're all spooky people here.
We're all in the right place. Welcome.
If it had worked out differently, the group of settlers that came to be known as the Donner Party would have slipped over the Sierra Nevada into California. But poor planning and a series of bad decisions and early snowstorms caused 60 of the original pioneers to become stranded in the mountains during the winter of 1846. And as hypothermia set and food ran out, many resorted to the greatest of human taboos, cannibalism. After reaching Wyoming, most California-bound pioneers followed a route that swooped north through Idaho before turning south and moving across Nevada. In 1846, however, a dishonest guidebook author named Lansford Hastings was promoting a straighter and supposedly quicker path that cut through the Wasatch Mountains and across Salt Lake Desert.
kind of like a Northwest Passage.
Yeah, exactly. Trying to find the quick route.
Take the shortcut.
The short way out. There was just one problem. No one had ever traveled this Hastings cutoff with wagons, not even Hastings himself.
Oh, God.
Despite the obvious risks and against the warnings of James Clayman, an experienced mountain man, the 20 Donner Party wagons elected to break off from the usual route and gambled upon Hastings Back Road. The decision proved disastrous. The immigrants were forced to blaze much of the trail themselves by cutting down trees, and they nearly died of thirst during a 5-day cross across the Salt Desert.
Wow.
Rather than saving time, Hastings' shortcut ended up adding nearly a month to the Donner Party's journey.
Oh my God.
If it was a single person, or just like a small group of people, maybe.
Yeah.
But when you got 20 wagons going through trails that have never been cut for wagons,
or probably if it's not very often used, they're probably not even cut for like foot traffic.
right? Exactly.
And like,
And these people are like,
again, they're just like regular people.
I would not be able to wander through even just up and down a mountain, one mountain
Yeah.
that didn't have a trail, just by a guidebook to
Yeah.
find landmarks and stuff to guide you through. I wouldn't even be able to do that.
No,
these people are going across states from a
you-
guidebook and not set footpath trails.
Yeah, and like
And
you
no
hear-
signs.
There's stories about hikers who get lost in the wilderness because
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I'll take a shortcut back to camp, and they're out there for like 2 days and die of exposure.
Yeah. Why you would trust a guidebook versus just going the route that everyone has always taken is beyond me.
Sometimes you need that anecdotal evidence.
Yeah. Despite the Hastings cutoff debacle, most of the Donner Party still managed to reach the slopes of the Sierra Nevada by early November 1846. Only a scant 100 miles remained in their trek, but before the pioneers had a chance to drive their wagons through the mountains, an early blizzard blanketed in the Sierras in several feet of snow.
Here we
Again,
go.
a freak snowstorm. This is how it always goes,
Yep,
right?
we got a freak winter, we got a freak drought.
Yep. Mountain passes that were navigable just a day earlier soon transformed into icy roadblocks, forcing the Donner Party to retreat to nearby Truckee Lake and wait out the winter in ramshackle tents and cabins. Much of the group's supplies and livestock had already been lost on the trail, and it wasn't long before the settlers began to perish from starvation.
Man, this is some Oregon Trail shit right here.
Yeah, I always died of
You
scurvy,
died of dysentery.
Yep.
Except for real.
Like most pioneer trains, the Donner Party was largely made up of family wagons packed with young children and adolescents. Of the 81 people who became stranded at Truckee Lake, more than half were younger than 18 years old, and 6 were infants.
Oh my God.
However, some children did make up the vast majority of the Donner Party's eventual survivors.
Wow.
One of them, a 9-year-old Isabella Breen, would go on to live until 1935.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
On December 16th, 1846, more than a month after they became snowbound, 15 of the strongest members of the Donner Party strapped on makeshift snowshoes and tried to walk out the mountains to find help. After wandering the frozen landscape for several days, they were left starving on the verge of collapse. The hikers resorted to cannibalism and considered drawing lots for human sacrifice, or even have 2 of the men square off in a duel.
Wow.
Several members of the party soon died naturally, however, so the survivors roasted and consumed their corpses. There you go.
You gotta put that roasted in there. We can't, it's not good enough to know that they ate them. We gotta
Well,
know
at
how
least they were
ate 'em.
eating cooked humans instead of
Just
frozen chunks.
yeah, oh my
like in
God.
your story.
Yeah.
I'm sure they didn't have a fire to roast them.
Nah, they just went at it with their teeth, I suppose. Because they were not doing good. But
Right.
these guys were pretty sane.
Yeah,
They weren't lead poisoned.
I mean, they
they weren't
they
doing
were as
good.
sane as you can be. After surviving starvation and eating people.
Yeah.
But the gruesome meat gave them the energy they required, and following a month of walking, 7 of the original 15 made it to a ranch in California and helped organize rescue efforts.
Wow.
Historians would later dub their desperate hike the Forlorn Hope. During the Forlorn Hope, expedition, the hiking party included a pair of Indians named Salvador and Lewis, both of whom had joined up with the Donner immigrants shortly before they became snowbound. The natives refused to engage in cannibalism, and Salvador and Lewis later ran off out the fear that they might be murdered once the others ran out of meat. Indeed, when the duo was found days later, exhausted and lying in the snow, a hiking party member named William Foster shot both of them in the head.
Oh.
The Indians were then butchered and eaten by the hikers.
Oh, of course that happened.
Yep. It was the only time during the entire winter that people were recorded murdering for food.
Yeah. Like, it's even hypothesized that the Franklin expedition just, like, ate their dead. They weren't, like, actively shooting people and killing them and eating them.
Yeah,
so that's brutal.
About half or so made it out alive from the original 80-some pioneers who began the Donner Party. It was really hard to find hauntings associated with them because they were on such a long trail and they did bad things throughout the trail, but the site where their main camp was, where they were snowbound, things do happen. Thousands of visitors who visit the Donner Memorial State Park get an overpowering feelings of being watched and not being alone. They also smell odors of cooking meat, but not meat that they've ever smelled before, hence human flesh, and the sense that there's a campsite nearby, but there is none. There are stories of skiers who have gotten lost and reported seeing a woman who leads them to a camp, and they're in need of help. And so the skiers go off, they go back to where they came from, they come with help, but there's no sign that a camp had ever been there. So they're kind of seeing the lost souls of this Donner Party
got a little
trapped forever in this horrific experience.
It's like a little bit of Resurrection Mary out there. You know? That's wild. Because I think Ask a Mortician, I think she also did one on the Donner Party.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So this was Expedition Cannibalism.
Yay.
It must be an awful experience to have to resort to something as disgustingly gruesome and horrific as cannibalism. Yeah. Especially of people you know. Yeah, people who you have literally gone through the worst time of your life with. Yeah. You know, consistently over several months, and now you have to eat them. Yeah. Or kill them and eat them. Which is worse. Yeah. You know, you look somebody in the eye and they're like, "Please don't kill me." And then you're like, "Tough. I'm hungry.
Sorry, man, I gotta eat." Like,
or like digging up a grave that's who knows how long it's been decomposing and rotting to eat it. I can't smell. It's all in winter, so maybe it's not that. What I found really cool about the story you're telling about the Franklin expedition is how those indigenous people found them, and they were like, "Oh man!" They were just like frozen zombies, and they just left a place they could have survived, but they were just so long gone. Yeah, they were just too messed up to really even know how messed up they were. Absolutely crazy. And you know, like the indigenous people showed them more humanity than they were shown in the Donner Party. Yeah, you know? They helped more on all of this than anyone. Yeah, they're living out in the Arctic, and they're like, you know, I see you guys are in rough shape. Here's a couple of seals, just like take a nap, recapitulate a little bit, and they're like, sorry, gotta eat Steve. Like, gonna eat Steve and wander back out into the wilderness. But I'm gonna leave my bones behind. Yeah, it's trash. Like just. You guys can clean up, right? It's fine. they were probably just on autopilot, just walking and eating, because that's what their mind was focused on. Walking to a destination and eating, and that's all that was left. Yeah, everything else is just kind of gone. Yeah. Well, that is all the time we have for today. Stay spooky. And the man who ate his own boots is a descriptor, not a nickname.